Okay, so I'm gonna tag team PowerPoint and my demo today. I'm gonna try really hard to do live demos of the data submission portal. We can make this informal, so if you have questions as we're going along or I click too fast or whatever, feel free to break in and interrupt at whatever point you want to, and we can just make this an informal discussion. But I'm gonna talk about the data submission portal today, and this is pretty hot off the presses. The release of the data submission portal that I'm going to demonstrate today is live. It was released yesterday. We're going to invite you all to take a look at this at the end of the presentation today. So it's something that you can actually try out, kick the tires. And then we're hoping that if you have feedback or whatever, you can either send it to us, you can submit issues to the issue tracker and GitHub, whatever is going to work out most easily for you. But let's get going here. Okay, so there's a few slides in here that you've seen before, so I'm going to move through these pretty quickly, but I wanted to talk a little bit about our motivations for building the data submission portal. So I hope all of you are convinced, I hope I'm preaching to the choir here, that the data that are being produced by your thematic cluster projects are first-class products of research. And so our motivation in building the data submission portal is to hopefully make your jobs easier in sharing that data, to enhance the value of your data by making it findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And hopefully, as we start getting our data out there and getting data shared across the thematic clusters, we'll promote some opportunities for collaboration, which might involve the data and results from your CZNet project, but also other CZNet projects. And we would also like to encourage you to think about increasing the impact of your publications through making sure that the data that those publications describe are being reused, they're being cited, they're being shared in publications, and you're actually citing those data. We'll have a discussion about that in an upcoming workshop. And then also, there's been talk with the PIs about specific opportunities for synthesis studies. It's going to be a lot easier for those synthesis studies to happen if the data are shared, obviously. And you know, this is another way for you all to enhance the broader impact of your CZNet project. Okay, so I don't think I'm telling you anything that you don't already know. And also meeting NSF's requirements is something that we all should be tuned into. Okay, so this figure came out of our proposal to NSF. And what I'm going to talk about specifically is this white box in the middle where we're building a new submission portal. You all live over here in this yellow box. So each of you is a thematic cluster with one or more data managers or investigators who are collecting data and need to submit data. We're building this piece to enable you to more easily and seamlessly share data through whatever repository you need to get that data into. Specifically, though, we're supporting some specific repositories through the data submission portal, and then we're going to enable the registration of data sets submitted to other repositories that we aren't necessarily supporting through the data submission portal, with the idea that eventually we'll have a discovery cataloging service in discovery over here that will be cataloging metadata for all of these data sets and then providing discovery across them as well. So this is the piece that we're focused on today, the actual data submission portal. Okay, so it's a new website. It's a new web application that we are supporting, that we are building. It enables submission to multiple geoscience data repositories through this one portal. It's focused on getting data to the right repository and submission directly through the portal. Our user management for the data submission portal is done via ORC IDs. So if you don't have an ORC ID already, you're going to need one to work with the data submission portal. We chose to use ORC IDs rather than creating some other identification system for the data submission portal because we figured most people probably already had them. And it's sort of growing in status within the academic community as a way for people to sort of identify themselves with academic publications and products. And it uniquely identifies people already, so it meets a lot of the needs that we needed them for. Okay, so I talked about the supported repositories. Our proposal from the very beginning was to operate and partner with existing repositories, and you see the ones on the page here. So we're partnered with HydroShare, EarthChem, Zenodo, and then I'll talk about the register dataset functionality too. We want to promote the use of FAIR principles, and these repositories all do. Permanent data archival and publication, that is a focus of these repositories. They all have ways to do access control for embargoed data. They all have ways to have open access for public data sets, and they all have ways to enable your data to be cited. But in this case, we're also leveraging existing NSF investment in HydroShare and EarthChem. And I'll talk about potentially adding other repositories later in the presentation today. Okay, so this page is live. The repository recommendation system is not live yet. So we're actually working on the content behind this page. So if you go to this page and click on the link, it's not going to work. We know about that. We've developed some content here that we're organizing for putting on this page to provide some assistance in selecting an appropriate repository. So, we're kind of organizing this content around themes. So if I have geospatial data, click on this button and you'll get guidance for geospatial data. If you have data derived from physical samples, click on this button and you'll get specific guidance for your physical sample data. You have hydrologic time series, you get the idea. So we're trying to provide some specific guidance based on the types of data that we know people are collecting. And then based on the inventory of data that we got from your data management plans, from your proposals, from the initial meetings that we did with all of you, from the notes that we took in all of the presentations that you did about your data collection at the beginning of the project, we've also developed some content specific to all of that too, that we're going to be presenting on this page. Okay, so I want to just say a couple words. I've showed you HydroShare. We've had a whole workshop on HydroShare. I don't need to spend much time on HydroShare, but HydroShare is one of our supported repositories. EarthChem, same story. You've had a full workshop on EarthChem, CZAR. If you didn't get a chance to see those recordings are available on the criticalzone.org webpage. You can go and watch those presentations. And you've had also a full workshop on Zenodo that Shannon put together for us, where we talked about what Zenodo does and doesn't do and all of that kind of stuff. It provides most of the same capabilities, and we talked about it as a catch-all generalist repository. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about the specific repositories that we're supporting in the data submission portal, because I want to focus our time today on an actual demo of using the data submission portal functionality and what you would expect to see as a user of the data submission portal and how it's actually going to work. Okay, so I'm gonna precede each step with a set of slides that shows you sort of what to expect, and then hopefully I should be able to flip over to the data submission portal and do the same thing live. When you log in, you can log into the portal using your ORC ID. User accounts in the portal, of course, are associated with your ORC ID, and you will need to grant the data submission portal access to your ORC ID. So the very first time you log in, you'll click this login button. It'll pop up this sign in, and then it'll say, oh, you need to authorize the CZHub application to actually authorize or to access your ORC ID record. When I log in, you're probably not going to see that because I've already done that authorization. It's a one-time authorization. So when I log in, I get the regular, you're all seeing my website now, right? Just checking.
Yes.
Okay, perfect, great, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna put my ORC ID in here, my super insecure password that has probably been stolen 50 times. And I sign in, and I don't get that authorization step because I've already done that once. And once you do that authorization with ORC ID, it's a one-time deal. It's stored in your profile. You can log in and out without that, okay? So just know there will be that extra step. The first time you log in, you'll see this authorized access window. We're using OAuth 2 for this. That's a standard OAuth 2 sort of a thing. You may see this often when you go to websites and they have options for like log in with Google or whatever. Okay, step 2, we need to choose which repository we want to submit data to. And we've got this submit data page. Right at the top, there's this button, help me decide, which is going to take you to the other page that I showed you where we're organizing that content, which will help you decide if you need help deciding, but you may already know, I need to put data in HydroShare or EarthChem or Zenodo. You will need a user account for each one of these repositories before you could submit data to these repositories. So you need a HydroShare account, you need an EarthChem account, you need a Zenodo account. But once you have that account, you'll click on, say, I want to submit the HydroShare. I click on that HydroShare button, and it'll pop up this submit to HydroShare button. I say authorize. And if I'm already logged into HydroShare, it will say, oh, authorize CZHub. If I'm not logged into HydroShare, it'll take me to a window where I actually log into HydroShare, and then it will say authorize CZHub, just like it did with OrcID. And again, this authorization step is a one-time step. It's saved in your user profile. Once you authorize it, you should be authorized. And the next time you come back, you click on HydroShare, it's going to take you directly to the submission page. Okay, so I go to submit data and I say, okay, I want to submit something to HydroShare. I'm already logged in. I've already done the authorization steps, so it takes me directly to the submit to HydroShare page, which you're seeing now. Okay. Any questions about the OAuth or the authorization? You're going to see this the first time you use this. And in fact, if you want to go to dsp-demo.criticalzone.org, it's all live now. You can sort of follow along if you want to. Okay. So the next step is we got to create some content. And what you're going to see is a metadata submission page. And right at the very top, you're going to see, oh, if you've got files that you want to put into the repository, you drag and drop your files here, or I guess you're going to drag and drop your files there. Each repository has its own data submission form because they each have a little bit different metadata requirements. So EarthChem's a little bit different than HydroShare, is a little different than Zenodo. And so we've designed each one of these forms to meet the metadata requirements of each one of the repositories. These data submission forms are actually built from a JSON schema that defines what the required and optional metadata elements are, the default values that are defined for any of those elements, and all of the et cetera. So when this form is rendered on the page, you know, the title is required, the abstract is required, the subject keywords are required because HydroShare requires those. We've also instituted a couple of minor requirements related specifically to CZNet. So you'll notice there's a CZNet keyword there. We want every resource that you create through the data submission portal to have a keyword called CZNet. Okay, so let me show you, let me just really quickly fill this out. So, you know, this is just like any other data submission form that you might have. Let me just grab a couple files and drag them over here and drop them. These are files that are going to get uploaded to HydroShare. They're just CSV files that I'm going to dump into this resource. And then I've got a title here, so I don't have to type this, and an abstract. So I don't have to type that. Keywords are pretty straightforward. So like water, hydrology, temperature, you know, whatever those keywords are that you want, maybe Logan River. And then for creators, I can create a record for me, and I'm going to put in my name like this, Horsborough Jeffrey S. There's my phone number, my address. That's not complete. Logan, Utah. So my organization, you can put a homepage in there if you want. So all the required fields are highlighted in red. Anything that's optional is gray. I can create some contributors here. So maybe Amber Jones is a contributor to this. I don't have to put her phone number in there, but maybe I put her organization. That's not her email. Amber.Jones. I'm never sure whether autocomplete on web browsers is good or not. Often does things you don't anticipate, like putting my phone number in there. That. Okay, so all of the same metadata elements that you would see in HydroShare if you need a spatial coverage, maybe this resource is in Logan, Utah, and you want to do a point coverage, so maybe like -111 point, I'm just making this up as I go. 43.12345, that's a latitude and longitude. We'll eventually have a map control on here, so you can do a point coverage by dropping a pin on the map or by drawing a bounding box. So we could do box coverage metadata or point coverage metadata, either one of those. You can do the standard temporal coverage. So maybe this is like the period of record for my data. And then you can use a date picker, or you can enter these dates however you want to do that. And then HydroShare has this key value pair metadata, related resources. And we've required the funding agency information. HydroShare doesn't require funding agency information, but for CZNet, we want everybody to be putting their funding agency information in there. So agency name, award title, maybe you have an award number that goes with that and a specific, URL that goes with your award. And just so you know, we're working on getting the licenses that HydroShare has in here, but right now we've sort of hard-coded this one license, the Creative Commons license. We're working on that. We know about that. So if I click save, what's happening behind the scenes when this is saving, the data submission portal is now going to HydroShare. It's creating a new resource in HydroShare. It's uploading all of the metadata and all of the data files that I just dropped on the form. And when it comes back, it should take me to an edit view of this resource in the data submission portal. Here's all of my files, all of the metadata that I just submitted. And we've taken you back to the edit form just in case, oh, I'm in an edit session, I clicked save. I want to save everything that I've done so far. I want to go back because I'm not done editing. But if you're done, you can click this finish button and it's going to take you to the My Submissions page. So now you have a new submission. This is the submission that you just created in HydroShare. It's in your My Submissions page. And that gets us back to the PowerPoint here. Okay, so when we submitted that content, the metadata and data files are actually sent to the repository. A new resource is created in the repository. And on the My Submissions page, if I click this View in Repository button, it will take me directly to HydroShare where this new resource was created. So title, abstract, there's all the keywords that I created. There's the spatial coverage, my random latitude and longitude. There's the files that I just uploaded. There's my funding agency information, contributors, everything that I've inputted on that form, okay? Okay, so, holy cow, something weird has happened to my, all right. All right, let me pause for just a second. Any questions so far? We've got a new resource in HydroShare. We've got a submission on our My Submissions page. And the metadata has all been captured by the data submission portal.
I have a question. I didn't notice on the page, but is it automatically, is the default set to private in HydroShare?
Good question. Yes, so if I go to HydroShare here, this resource right here, if I go to manage who has access right now, I haven't given access to anybody. It is set to shareable, but it's by default private. So when you create that resource, it's by default private. And now I can, in HydroShare, I can go in and I can change that access control to whatever we want. We're currently having a bit of a debate here about how much of this access control functionality we want to actually bring over to the data submission portal. Because right now, you can't change the access control of that HydroShare resource in the data submission portal, but you can go over to HydroShare and you can change it here using HydroShare's default controls. Yeah, thank you for asking that question. That's where we're at the moment. Okay, so on the My Submissions page, this is going to be an exportable record of what you have submitted. So this will list everything that you have submitted through the data submission portal. It will list anything that you've registered through the data submission portal. So anything you submit to HydroShare, EarthCam, or Zenodo is gonna go directly to the repository. But let's say you've submitted a high resolution topography data set to, say, Open Topography. I'll demonstrate here in a couple minutes how you actually register that data set since it's not one of our internally supported repositories. I'll show you how you can register that data set with the data submission portal so that when you click on this export submissions button, it's going to give you a list of everything that you've created ever. And that will be a really nice resource for you because at the end of the year, you all get to probably provide the PI of your grant with a list of data sets that they can input to the NSF annual report because NSF is asking us to report on data set submissions. So this will be a good way for us all to sort of provide that information.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Will this include stuff we've uploaded outside of the submission portal?
So look at this last bullet. So if you have a bunch of submissions before the data submission portal goes live, because Eric, I know you're already submitting things.
Yeah, I've got a whole bunch on
If you can, if you can give us a list of identifiers in HydroShare, we can register those data sets for you. In the API, which I will mention here in a few minutes, there's a function in the API where we can pass an identifier, we can register those things via the API so that you can have a complete list of everything that you've submitted, whether you did it outside of the data submission portal or not. As long as it was submitted to HydroShare, EarthChem, Zenodo, we can import those directly, and then I'll show you the functionality for registering stuff submitted to other repositories here in just a second.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, one other thing. So I've created this resource. It lives in HydroShare now, but I can actually go back and I can click the edit button, which is going to, right now what the data submission portal is doing is it's going to HydroShare. It's querying all of the metadata from HydroShare. It's querying the list of files from HydroShare, bringing all of those back. And now I could add additional files. I could modify, change to the title. I could do whatever I need to do here. And now that I've made a change, as soon as I click out of that thing, I can save those changes, which is now going to copy those changes back to HydroShare. It's going to update the form. And then when I'm done, I click finish and I go back to the My Submissions page. So we have a way to create the resource. We have a way to edit the resource. So just in case, you're in the middle of a session, I know it takes a while sometimes to fill out these metadata forms and you're not always exactly ready and done. When you're done with a session, you can save it. You can come back later. You can finish what you were doing. As long as you've filled out the required metadata elements, you should be able to save and create that record in HydroShare or Zenodo or EarthChem. The reason why we're requiring you to fill out the required metadata elements before you save is because while we're logging all of the metadata in the database underlying this application, the real record of the data set that you're creating, the resource that you're creating, is the repository record that you're creating. So we're creating things in HydroShare, we're retrieving things from HydroShare, we're creating things in Zenodo, retrieving things from Zenodo. The copy of the metadata that we're keeping will be used for cataloging and discovery purposes, but the real record of the metadata is in HydroShare, Zenodo, or EarthChem. Okay. All right, so repositories for data and research products. So we're supporting EarthChem, HydroShare, Zenodo. We know that no single repository will work for all of the CZ data. We know that those 3 repositories may not work for all CZ data. And we even mentioned open topography in our proposal as a repository that we would like to develop a relationship with. And we've been working on that a little bit. But we know that there may be other places that people have to submit data. So there's a few of the thematic clusters that are partnered with either DOE or LTER sites. And we know that people have to submit things to like ESS Dive or the LTER system. What's it called?
EDI.
Yes, thank you, Kirsten. Thank you. It's so nice to have the voice from the sky to help me out. Excuse me. So EDI, and when that happens, we want to make sure that we know about those resources too, right? So we needed a mechanism to make sure that you could tell us about those resources regardless of where they end up. Now, we do have in mind that we may in the future be able to support some of these additional repositories. There are some caveats there that those repositories must provide an application programming interface that we can actually use to make submissions. And if they don't, then we won't be able to do that. But we designed the data submission portal with this flexibility in mind, and I'll talk about that a little bit here in just a second too, where that gets back to sort of the way we're handling the metadata forms via JSON schema. Those metadata forms are dynamically generated from the JSON schema, and that means we have the flexibility and extensibility to add more repositories later. But first things first, I want to talk about registering data submitted to other repositories. So this is data sets submitted to repositories other than EarthChem, HydroShare, or Zenodo. This is going to enable you to keep track of everything in one place, and it also enables us as the hub team to know about everything that's been submitted so that we can actually build out the cataloging and discovery that we said in our proposal that we were going to build, okay? So we do this through the register data set function. So I go back to submit data, I click on the register data set tab, and now this form is almost just like the HydroShare form or the Zenodo form. But at the top, you see there's no files here. So we're not allowing you to upload any files. We're not even asking you to upload files, because what you're telling us about is something that's actually hosted somewhere else. So give us the title. This is a new data set in an external repository, and then tell us where it actually lives. So I'm just going to put my website URL in there, but you could use any URL. And this would be like the URL to the landing page of that resource, wherever it lives. And then you need to tell us a little bit about, well, maybe it was created today, maybe it was modified today, maybe it was published, I don't know, today. But you would give us those dates. Maybe it has a version, maybe it doesn't. That's not a required field. You would also give us a description or an abstract, the subject keywords that you've used. So again, you can just put keywords in here: hydrology, critical zone, soil, I don't know, whatever it needs to be. And then similar to the other forms, you're going to fill out the creator information. If you have the ORCID ID for that person, we've put that in there. Contributors here, maybe we've got Amber Jones again. She's at Utah State. That is not Amber's email. Maybe I don't have Amber's ORCID. That's okay. Temporal coverage again, period of record. Maybe it starts at the beginning of the month and ends at the end of the month. I don't know. I'm not going to fill out the spatial coverage for now, because that's going to take me a bunch of time. We can put related resources in here, just like HydroShare or Zenodo. Those related resources are things like, is there a paper associated with this? Is there some other data set that's derived from this? All of those things can be put in there. Again, we're requiring the funding agency information, because we want to make sure that whatever data sets that you are submitting are affiliated with some award name, and it should be your thematic cluster award. And then, because there's probably some diversity in the licenses under which things are released in external repositories, we've just said, tell us what the name of the license is, give us a description of the license, and if there's a URL, put that in there too. And then you need to tell us who's the provider. So let's say this is a resource that was submitted to Open Topography, and maybe there's a URL of the provider, and then some additional notes. You know, maybe you have some additional notes about this resource, like this is an awesome resource, and then we save it. Saving this one is a lot faster, because we're not actually transferring any files. We're not sending any files to a repository. We're just capturing the metadata. But let's say I'm done now. Now I've got this new data set in an external repository that's in my list of resources here. I can go back and edit it if I need to. And I can remove these things too if I need to remove them. Let's say I actually don't need this resource anymore. I can delete it. I moved it, or there's something else has happened. I can get rid of that. But now I've got a couple of things on my list. If I click on this export submissions, what's in this CSV file is going to be like all of the things that you would need to create a citation. So for some, I don't know what's going on with the date here. We need to fix the dates. But there's the title. So authors, date, title, the repository that you submitted to, and then the URL, which is where that thing actually lives on the web. And that's all going to come out in a CSV file. And if that CSV file is not what you want or what you need, we can certainly modify it to output, whatever output you think is going to be most useful for your NSF reporting purposes. Okay, any questions about registering data submitted to other repositories? All right, so I talked a little bit about this JSON schema-based metadata. Under the hood, there's a JSON schema for each one of these repositories that defines the metadata. It defines the data types of each one of the metadata elements. It defines default values if they exist. It defines whether those metadata elements are required or optional. So that when I pull up one of these submission forms, let's say I want to submit something to Zenodo, this form is actually being dynamically generated from that JSON schema. The required elements, the JSON schema defines which one of those are required and optional. And then we've figured out how to render those in a form that you can actually fill out on the page. And what that means is that adding a new repository to the portal means adding a new JSON schema. And of course I said, yeah, you gotta have an application programming interface as well. But as we investigate other repositories that people are using, that may or may not be the case, but we have a way to incorporate them if we actually are able to with an API and a JSON schema. Okay, talked about this, forms dynamically built from the JSON schema. I also want to talk today a little bit about promoting best practices. So this page we're going to use for adding content that hopefully will help us settle on some best practices for things like sharing geospatial data sets, and what do we do to share sensor time series data, and what do we do to share data derived from samples. So as I told you before, we're working on this content now, so there's not a lot of content behind this page. But as a community, I think we should be considering standard formats, templates, best practices, and this is where these are going to land in the data submission portal. So there's this resources pages up here at the top, best practices and data templates. We're working on some information about tools for automating submissions down here, because I know a couple of you, including Luigi, have talked about actually, can we automate the process of using the data submission portal? The answer is yes. We have some automated submission capability. So right now, the data submission portal is going to have some web service endpoints. We have some previews of the API documentation at these links right here. Let me just go there. So data submission portal API, there's this documentation for, HydroShare, and I think there's similar documentation for Zenodo. There's documentation in here for EarthChem. And then there's this sort of standard Swagger documentation. So if you actually want to try the API methods, you should be able to come here. I realize that it may be a little difficult for you at the moment to get your access tokens to work with these. And I was talking to Scott Black about this. We're working on figuring out a better way for you to get your access tokens so you can actually come and try the API stuff. So we're working on that. But this would actually allow you to do some automated submissions to a repository, either by you construct the metadata in a JSON file, send it to our validation service to make sure that the metadata is valid. And then you could use the repository API in the same way we're using the repository API to create the resource and submit everything. Or we're actually working on trying to make sure that you could actually submit to the repositories through our API in the same way the user interface is allowing you to do this. I think we're going to get there, but I know we're going to have that validation endpoint, and I know we're going to have instructions for using the actual repositories API, but I think we'll actually have all of our internal API methods for working with those external APIs should be exposed as external methods as well. Okay, just to finish up here in the last couple minutes, and then hopefully we'll have some discussion. Without the data submission portal, you as the data managers would have to sort of navigate the interfaces of multiple systems. You'd have to keep track of everything you're submitting to each one of those systems. And it's also difficult for us because then we have to go and sift through HydroShare and Zenodo and EarthChem and potentially a bunch of other systems to figure out what you submitted to those systems. Whereas with the data submission portal, now you only need to interact through one user interface. Submissions to all of the repositories are going to be tracked in one place, which hopefully is going to make your reporting life easier. And then on our side of the fence, we'll know about all of these submissions. We can automatically register them for cataloging and discovery. And when we actually provide a discovery interface for CZNet, we'll actually know about everything that's been submitted and have the metadata available to us for catalog. So that's a plus for all of us who I think are here. So there's some other advantages. So there's a little bit of validation going on here where we're validating the metadata, making sure things that are at least minimally well described. And it also is helping us promote a little bit of consistency in CZNet data products across the repositories. It is going to help us ensure that those data products end up in appropriate trusted repositories and enforcing some minimum metadata requirements. Right now, that's not very onerous, just like consistent keywords, funding agency grant information that we're requiring. We would like to build some use of controlled vocabularies and templates into the system. We're not there yet. But we are at the point where I think we're getting sufficient functionality to enable you to use a single interface and tool to submit data. And also simple and consistent registration of CZNet data sets with a metadata index for discovery. That's the next step for us after this tool is sort of up and running and you all are submitting data, then we wanted to build that discovery functionality. So it's going to be important for us to help all of you and us keep track of what's been submitted. And I mentioned data discovery services. So we've written functional specifications for cross-repository view of CZNet data and research products. So we're calling this cataloging and discovery functional design specifications. And in here, we've described discovery based on authors, geographic area, time, thematic cluster, using schema.org metadata. This document has been through a few iterations with our team. I think we're reasonably complete. We just discussed this week completing this document, releasing it to the thematic cluster PIs and all of you for some feedback, and then focusing one of our upcoming data workshops on making sure that we're getting all of the requirements right and that it's, sort of we know what all of you want here with discovery. And then we're going to start evaluating some existing systems to see whether they will meet our needs and whether we can just adopt something or whether we actually need to build something here. So this is focused on making everything that you're submitting, focused on submitting now findable and accessible through cataloging and discovery. We want you to try out the data submission portal and help us test. So as I said, dsp-demo.criticalzone.org is live. It's available to all of you now. We hope you will try it. We hope you will kick the tires. What is working? So submission to HydroShare is working. Submission to Zenodo is working. Registering data sets shared in other external repositories is also working. We're still working on EarthChem. So if you go to here, let's see, the CZHub, and you go to submit data and you click on the EarthChem, it's not gonna do anything yet. We're working very hard on this. So we've got a little bit of work left to do with EarthChem's authorization service to make sure that the data submission portal can communicate with EarthChem. And that's in the works now. So we're also working on that content behind the repository recommendations, resources, and data submission templates. So don't get too angry if that content is not there. But you should test with impunity because the dsp-demo.criticalzone.org is hooked up to Zenodo's sandbox and HydroShare's beta server. So none of the stuff that you create using DSP demo will actually be permanent. It's not going to hit production HydroShare. It's not going to hit production Zenodo. Everything that you do is just in the sandbox environment. DSP demo is a demo server for us to, hit, kick, do whatever we can do to break it. And please send us any feedback that you have. You can submit bugs directly at this GitHub link, CZNetHub/DSP/issues, or you can send your testing experience to me. You can send stuff to Clara, whatever's going to work best for you. You can submit all of those things there. So with that, I think I will stop sharing and open this back up so I can see you all. And do you have questions or thoughts about what you've seen so far?
Looks great, Jeff. Thank you. I can't wait to test it. It'll be fun.
Cool. Well, I know that you all will click the buttons in a different sequence than I clicked. And so I'm sure that you will find things that are issues with the DSP demo.
Will you put your slides up right away so we can review them as needed?
Yes, I will get these dumped into the Google Drive, and then I'll get with Maddie as soon as this meeting is done and get it linked up to the criticalzone.org. Yeah. And I did notice, Claire, that a couple of the slide presentations and video links were wrong on criticalzone.org. So I asked Maddie to fix those, and I think she followed up and fixed those this week. So hopefully that page will be up to date maybe later today.
Yeah, it's all up to date. I just need to get the recording from today up. So
perfect. Yeah, thanks, Maddie, for doing that. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for making the API available. So a couple of questions. You mentioned that one is the access token or key. That's something that you're gonna let us know how to get it. And we're happy to, do workarounds in the meantime if you want. Whatever, it takes to make it easy for us to try it out. And the other question I had was, I didn't catch, you said that the APIs, they work, but they don't do certain things with the backend. Is it the upload of the files? Or what was it that you don't have there yet?
Yeah, so we're handling the files in kind of an interesting way. So the files themselves never actually live in the portal. And we're doing that because we don't want to upload them to the portal and then upload them to the repository. So we have this dual upload. So you drag and drop them on that control, and when you hit save, they go directly to the repository when the resource is created. So the API that we're exposing through the data submission portal has all of the metadata functionalities. It has all the capabilities to create the resource, update the meta, do all of that kind of stuff, but it doesn't actually have the file capabilities because that's all being handled sort of in the front end in the browser, and it's never actually going to the portal. So that is a little bit of a limitation of our data submission portal API, but HydroShare, Zenodo, EarthChem, they're all going to have API functions for submitting those files. So you could use the native repository API for submitting and updating the files.
Got it. That's the plan long term, right? So we should plan to do that.
I think you should plan that. So that's going to be my official story for now. Okay. We were just talking to Scott about this today because literally this week is the first time I saw the documentation of the API. And I'm going to be honest with you, I gave you the links to the API documentation, and I have not been through them thoroughly. So you may get on there and be like, oh, what's Scott up to, right? This is pretty the API in particular is pretty bleeding edge stuff. So if you have ideas, certainly let us know. Like, I don't like the way this works, or I wish you would have done things this way. It's going to make us way easier for us to use this. I think we're open to modifying things a little bit. There are some downstream implications occasionally. So we have actually had to make some changes on the HydroShare side to support some of these API functions. And the EarthChem API is totally new. Like, Kirsten's group has been furiously working hard on developing the EarthChem API. And we're trying as hard as we can to sort of standardize things as much as we can across HydroShare, EarthChem, and Zenodo. And that's been an interesting exercise because they're not, those repositories aren't exactly the same, but we're trying to keep the patterns the same. So yeah, if you've got ideas, certainly let us know.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much. Like, it looks great, and we'll play with it. We'll let you know. We found the repository in GitHub. Do you want us to communicate on the issues, like you said? Do you want emails, personal emails?
If you feel comfortable going to GitHub, let me see. So I gave you this link. Let me just make sure. I think what we've done is we've implemented issues. So if I create a new issue, I believe we have templates for bug reports. We have feature request and release checklist templates. So either use a bug report if you think it's a bug, or a feature request if you think it's a feature request. And you should be, and there should be specific sections in there that you fill out for those. So yeah, if you're comfortable submitting issues to GitHub, just go directly there.
Okay, awesome, thank you. And you're not sharing your desktop anymore, so I don't know if you were showing GitHub right now or.
I was making sure that we had those templates in there. Yeah. Let me give you the specific link. I'll put that in the chat.
All right, thank you.
All right, so here is the specific link that I want you to use to submit issues, because there are actually, I think there's a separate GitHub repository for the front end and the back end, and then there's this more general DSP one, and we want the issues going into the general DSP one. Yeah, if you look at our CZNet hub organization in GitHub, you're going to see multiple repositories. So this is the one we want you to use.
Got it. Thank you so much. I had found the backend one, but I didn't realize that you had these other ones. Thank you.
Yeah.
Looks great. Thank you so much.
Cool. Eric, Rachel, Byung, welcome, Byung. I see you joined us maybe just a little bit late.
Yeah, I'm good. Looks interesting. We'll play.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm good too, Jeff. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Perfect. Well, spread the word, because we would like this to be a tool that all of you are using, but we've built this tool with the idea in mind that there may be others within your thematic clusters that eventually use it. You know, I don't know whether an ideal world is that every single data set being submitted by a thematic cluster goes through a data manager, and the data manager's, you know, checking things and making sure everything is good. But probably you may all be thinking an ideal world is if I could just get these investigators to submit their data and do things on their own, that would be an ideal world too. So we're trying to create all these tools in a way that, you know, mere mortals can do them as well, realizing that the people that I'm staring at right now probably have a little bit more experience with data management and submission than most of the people who are working on these larger projects. So if you're getting feedback from people like, oh, I checked out the data submission portal and I have no idea what it does and I don't know what I'm supposed to do, then we're also willing to meet with people. I mean, first of all, that's great feedback for us if we need to change the functionality, but we're also willing to meet with people and talk about, okay, here's how you use this. Here's what our expectations are. Here's what you should be doing. Here's what you put in this metadata field. Like we can do all of that kind of stuff too. And we plan on continuing our data help sessions so we can manage some of those things in our data help sessions as well.
I have a question, Jeff.
Yeah, fire away.
When does the portal make everything permanent? Do we need a review period from everyone and then everything is permanent? When does it just start to be usable?
Yeah, so I think your question is, when are we going to switch from DSP-demo to dsp.criticalzone.org, the production system?
Yes.
In our CZHub CIT meeting this week, we discussed that we do not want to release a production version of the data submission portal until we have the EarthChem repository supported. The API is written, the authorization service has been stood up. Scott and Peng are meeting this week to talk about the last few items of the authorization service. And then it's just a matter of wiring those pieces together to get it to function the way Zenodo and HydroShare are functioning in the data submission portal. I don't know exactly how long that's going to take, but I anticipate that it's going to happen in the next couple of months. So I think we would be looking at a production version of the data submission portal sometime in the next couple of months. I'm shooting from the hip a little bit here because sometimes crazy stuff happens. And like I said, the EarthChem API is totally brand new. We're doing something totally new here. And we've got a few issues to work through there, but hopefully that is ballpark figure. Does that answer your question, Shannon?
Yes. So in the meantime, if people do want to submit something, they should continue to use the individual repositories while testing the demo?
Correct. And as I told Eric, as long as you have a list of, let's say, URLs or identifiers for those resources in HydroShare or EarthChem or Zenodo, if you put them there, you give us that list, we'll make sure those get registered with the data submission portal, and they will show up under your your user account in the data submission portal as if they were submitted through the data submission portal.
Yeah, when do you want that information?
I would say we're not ready for it now. When we go live, Eric, probably would be the best time for that. So just keep doing what you're doing. I know you're doing great stuff. Keep doing what you're doing. Just make sure you're keeping a list of everything you're submitting.
Yeah, we have the identifiers in our keywords, and I would probably just give you that.
Yeah, that'd work.
Yeah, no URL.
Great.
So, okay.
One question that we actually had was that hasn't been quite solved is how do we integrate registration of samples into the portal? And that's another thing where we need your feedback somehow. Can that just be a completely separate process? Or should it in some way go through the portal as well so that samples registered from CZ clusters are also captured in a metadata catalog that can be searched easier? maybe that's a discussion we can have once the portal is in production and is being
Yeah.
used, and people feel that there are still different places to go in order to be fully compliant with all the stuff they need to do for data management. So maybe it's a discussion to have, in summer or in fall.
I suspect it's a question that maybe takes just a little bit of time to sink in, because many of you probably are starting to think of samples because you probably have some samples now. You're probably getting analytical results. You may be registering those samples with CZAR. You may be familiar. Maybe you're at the point where it's like, well, I haven't registered my samples yet. I'm not sure exactly how to. I'm going to use CZAR to do that, but I haven't done it yet. So it might take a little bit for that to sink in, and it might actually take trying things out at CZAR before you decide, oh yeah, I would much rather have all of this done through the data submission portal, or no, CZAR is great. I'd rather just go to CZAR and do it there.
Yeah, I was trying to think about, your question, and we do have a scientist who went to CZAR and got, the registered the samples. And so what you're saying is that, could that registration of the sample be included in the portal? Would that be helpful? Or is it okay to just go to CZAR? That's your question, right?
Yeah, and so the actual process of registering the samples and inputting sample metadata is actually a lot like what I showed you today for creating a new resource in HydroShare, right? You're just describing a sample instead of a full data set. We've had various conversations about this with Kirsten and group. Like, there's the process at CZAR. EarthChem does a really nice job of linking data sets with samples, so that if you discover a data set, which samples went with that data set. Kirsten, does the linkage the other way work too? If you discover a sample in CZAR?
No, not yet. I mean, the problem is that samples are registered very early in their lifetime.
Right.
Actually, the metadata profile in CZAR is supposed to be a birth certificate, as we call it, of the sample, right? It's when was it generated, where was it generated, and who did it, what instrument did you use, and it doesn't happen that people give us the DOIs of the data sets. Once we have enough samples in the EarthChem library, we might be able to establish, a harvesting of, all the DOIs of data sets that actually have that particular IGSN in it, but that hasn't been developed yet. Be happy to. I mean, I really think it's an important service that we want to provide as much as possible, but clearly it will, because we can harvest from the EarthChem library, but there are so many other data systems out there that may have data for the samples that it does require a bit of a community building around this, the sample data to make that a real useful tool.
Okay, well, we are basically at the end of our time today, so we'll be back online next week with a data help session. We may be juggling topics a little bit for the next workshop. We're going to have a workshop related to Jupyter notebooks, sharing code with data, and enhancing reproducibility of scientific work by sharing code with data. Tony Castronova is going to help us with that, and we're kind of juggling scheduling with that. So I'm not sure exactly what our next data workshop is going to be. I need to look at the schedule and see how that's going to work in. But definitely we'll be back next week for a data help session, and hopefully we'll see you all then and answer your questions. Thank you all for joining today. I'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
See ya.